Good evening, fellas. Happy to see everybody's face again on another episode of the Blind Pig, courtesy of bgobsession.com. Swing by, please mix it up. Intros. Top left is John. He hails as Boone. Bottom left is Paul. He hails as Canadian Hog. Bottom right is Mark. He hails as Ohm. And my name's Derek. You can catch me at Silent Threat. So make your way over to the board and mix it up. Have some fun. Please join us for game day chats and different competitions and fun little activities we've got going on the board, as well as normal message board discussion.
And people just as obsessed about this crazy team as you are.
Oh, and then the latecomer here will be gracing us with his beautiful face. There's Bob, who hails as Neophyte.
Bob is making an entrance.
I
didn't mean to make an entrance. That was not the plan. But okay.
But it works though,
You built some good buzz before you.
That's right.
Okay.
And we didn't abuse you too much.
Easy kind of related topic, but have you guys seen Sam Howell's numbers over the last 5 weeks?
Funny thing, I just happened to see that.
If I'm not mistaken, he leads the league in yards and in touchdowns. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah, I just posted it on the board. He is, let's see, he currently has more completions, 235 than every quarterback in the NFL, more passing yards, 2,471 than every quarterback in the NFL, except for Tua, more passing touchdowns, 14 this season than Kenny Pickett has his entire career. Sorry, Mark. And he's doing it with the most sacks of any quarterback in the league. So, and that was NFL Rookie Watch, since we're stealing their content, to give them a little at NFL Rookie Watch, WATXH.
He's also number one in pass attempts by 20 over Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. I mean, some of that, let's be real, some of that we have to acknowledge is the fact that we're just passing out of our mind. Like, our passing rate is way more than any of us ever would have predicted. So, I mean, but you have to complete a lot of those passes.
I was going to say, but the other side of that coin is at all of these attempts, all of these yards, all of these opportunities, knock on wood, you're not hearing that he's also leading the league in interceptions. He's leading, he's not leading the lead in fumbles. He's not also, sacrificing the team or the game, the ability to win football games because of all this. So just a little added touch there.
That 4-pick game against Buffalo, I mean, that really hurt his ratio, right? 14-5. 14-5 looks a whole lot better than 14-9.
Well, and that was the big sack game too, wasn't it? I mean, he had 7 sacks against Buffalo. Take that game out of the
9. I think it was 9 sacks.
Buffalo. Take that game out, and Sam's effectively rookie season looks very, very different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So according to this same poster, there's only 3 quarterbacks from the 2022 class that are still starters: Pickett, Sam, and Brock Purdy. So you can make a pretty good argument right now that he looks like the cream of the crop of that draft class. It's still early. I mean, we got to always say that, but
recently I've seen from multiple Twitter users, and I have no clue. Right. So here's the caveat. I have no clue if they're Washington fans or not. Maybe they're Washington fans. But re-ranking the quarterbacks taken in last year's draft, and Sam Howell comes out on top in every single one of those things I see.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Matt Corral, who a lot of people were beating the drum for here, and not in this group. I'm just talking about in Washington. I saw a lot of people beating the drum for. Is it the absolute bottom of the list? I'm not even sure he's on an NFL roster at the moment.
I'm not sure he's had enough pass attempts to qualify for a whole lot of meaningful rankings either.
So just not to get too much into it, because we got games to talk about, but I'll throw it out to you, Paul. What's Sam Howell look like right now if Scott Turner's still the offensive coordinator? What's your best guess?
That's a good question. I really like the fact that Bieniemy is throwing him to the wolves, so to speak. We're getting a true sense of who he actually could be and who he can actually become. Scott Turner, I mean, a lot of us last year were harping on the fact that, he quit on the run game from time to time, but I think at the end of the day, in desperate moments, at certain points in the season, he did rely on it. And I remember a few specific games where, it was run in order to secure a victory. I like the fact that, again, we're getting to see who this kid could be. And he's basically having the kitchen sink thrown at him by Bieniemy. I don't think we necessarily see the same version of Sam Howell in a different offensive system and with someone who doesn't emphasize the pass as much as Eric Bieniemy does.
Yeah, we know he wouldn't be averaging 38 pass attempts a game. And we know that he would not be doing what we saw in the last couple of weeks, all the quick stuff that we as fans have been talking about forever, right? The one and 3-step drops, get the ball out, and all the quick game stuff. Scott just never did that. So we wouldn't be seeing that progression that Sam's making either. Which brings us to the New England game. How about that, Sam Howell?
Mm-hmm. Hey,
Hey, I was going to, before we get started, I was going to start a drinking game to play when we watch Ron Rivera press conferences, and you got to drink every time he said grow and develop. But I threw up and passed out before I could invite anyone else to play with me. But anyway, it's fun for all the kids if you want to try it. It was like 35 times in the last presser. Grow and develop. Grow and develop.
Well, and it's like he's a backhanded attempt at trying to say, like, justify being here next year. I don't think Harris and company would even consider it. I think I hope that they've got their mind made up that the system that they're running right now just as flawed as it is, and it's just not going to work. But it's like he's trying to like last grasp. Well, I didn't have a quarterback before, and I didn't have. Come on, Rivera.
Yeah,
you didn't find this quarterback either. He fell into your lap, and you got lucky.
Coach Rivera, how did you feel about your two defensive ends after Montez and Chase left? Well, we're really excited about the development of our young quarterback.
You're right. Like
more so than anything else.
You mean the same young quarterback that every time was brought up in the offseason, you kept talking about not sleeping on Jacoby Brissett? Like, you give me a break.
Jacoby's done a lot of good things too, and I like having him here. I really
on the yellow practice field because they can't water things in Ashburn.
At one point during the game on Sunday, I think it wasn't too long, maybe after Sam threw one of the most cringeworthy interceptions I can remember a Washington quarterback throwing. They showed a shot of Jacoby on the sideline with his helmet on. I don't know if the timing was right. And I just thought to myself, oh, don't you do it. Don't you do it. Not now.
I think Hal said that was not just the worst throw he'd made as a pro. It was like the worst throw he'd ever made as a football player.
Yeah, it was.
Has he spoken on what I have never heard definitively what he was trying to do? Was he trying to throw it away and didn't, or did he just try to force it?
Yeah, I read someplace he said he was trying to throw it away and just didn't get enough on it.
That makes sense. I mean, okay, it happens. The timing kind of hurt.
The timing,
yeah, that was a brutal turnover.
I'll admit when that happened, right? We're down 14-10 after getting out to a fast start. And then we start doing Commanders things. We turn it over deep in our end and they score right away. And then we bust a run fit and give up a 412-yard TD run to Stevenson. We're down, and I'm thinking, okay, if we score by the half, even if we just get 3 there, we've stemmed the tide and we're back. We're okay. And when that pick happened, I thought it was over. I really did.
Well, and that also was a game where the officiating, that was and it wasn't just against us. I think you pointed that out, Mark, but that was some of the worst officiating I've ever seen. We were in the chat room because we do a weekly game chat. That's a lot of fun. And Derek kept saying, there's another offside, uncalled offside, another offside. There were literally like 4 obvious offsides that you don't even have to understand football. You're just like, why does that guy move early? That was uncalled. And I mean, I know there were a lot of other calls that were talked about.
Well, the sack strip fumble at midfield in the first defensive series of the second half remains one of the worst calls I have ever seen.
Oh my gosh. Did you see, who was it? Albert Breer posted video of that, and across the top of it he said quarterback tackled, flag, 15 yards, first down.
That was just brutal.
This might be an unpopular opinion, but I said this in the chat. If I'm Rivera at that point, I'm throwing my headset. You know what I mean? You gotta, like, if nothing else, just to get it so that the national media talks about it on Monday morning. You know what I mean? Like, get ejected, for God's sakes. Like,
I saw a lot of media talking about it.
I like that idea, like a baseball manager, right? Go kick
right,
dirt
yeah,
on the
like the
ball.
manager getting ejected for, he picks the first base up off the dirt and throws it in the mid center field.
I don't know if he would
Guess
have
what?
been.
Everybody will start talking about why he got ejected, but
I don't know. Would we be able to negotiate the second half without his mastermind wizardry on the sideline?
I'm not sure, but I think we can make do.
Well, I thought about this a lot this week because I've seen some crazy things in some other sports in the last 4 or 5 days, and it occurred to me that almost every single sport out there, especially if there is an element of contact, the potential for some level of unintentional violence. So we're not talking about boxing here because that's intentional violence. But I'm thinking football, I'm thinking soccer, and maybe 2 or 3 others. There seems to be a fairly significant move towards concern for player safety, and I'm all for it, right? I would love to seriously reduce, if not obviously eliminating injuries is not possible, but seriously reduce the level of injuries. But it is causing a tremendous amount of angst with fan bases the world over because change is hard. And protecting players is a change from yesterday and a change from 10 years ago and 20 years ago. And, what did I see? The head slap. They were showing Deacon Jones pictures and him coming off the line and literally banging guys in the ear hole. Yes. The head slap, and with the way the helmet's around your head, you do that and it creates real pressure in there. I mean, you can seriously hurt somebody's ear. I mean, it doesn't just ring your bell. It's a whole new level of.
Seemed like a good idea at the time.
Well, and it served Deacon Jones well for his entire career. But
I think the rules should not involve expecting players to defy the laws of physics. Like you can't in that particular play. There's no way to stop your body. There's no way. It's not physically possible to not come down on the quarterback to some extent.
But the NFL wants them to wrap the guys up, spin to the side, and spoon on the way down.
Right.
Well, and I'd like to see somebody put a real stopwatch on the amount of time that KJ Henry, that from the impact when he actually hit Jones to halfway down the fall, right? It's like a fraction of a second.
Right.
And he's supposed to execute what do they call it? A quarter roll or something. And it's the larger point is that it's gotten out of hand. And I agree, it's player safety is a good thing. And Tony Siragusa used to blow up quarterbacks by landing on them with his full weight. And we don't allow that anymore. And that's a good thing. But that, to me, the real problem was that call isn't reviewable like so many others are now, that somebody upstairs couldn't radio down to the head referee and say, you need to look at that one. That was not such and such. They do it all the time, right? They come on and say, there's no flag for roughing the passer. And the play goes on. But for some reason, that one can't be reviewed still.
So I was thinking maybe one way to tackle these, previous week games is to do just a what did you like, a quick hitter, what did you like, what didn't you like? Because I think if we do that, we can hit the highlights pretty with time efficiency. So what did you guys like? Let's start with the positive. Obviously, we like Sam Howell's performance.
Well, I
So-
was going to say, to dig deeper, I liked not that he threw the bad interception, but that he came back and was just absolutely, again, proving that he doesn't get too down on himself. He's got short memory. Because shortly after that, he dropped the ball in the bucket 40 yards downfield that Dotson had to go get, but it was perfect. Nobody was making a play on that. Dotson made the play. And he was threading passes, and he did not look like that. He wasn't rattled at all from what I could tell.
Mhm.
I'll participate in this one. One of the things that stood out to me the most from this past Sunday was that for the first time in a very long while this season, we got contributions from multiple individuals from our most recent draft class. Manuel Forbes had a pretty decent game. You heard Quan Martin's name being called. I mean,
You heard
we
it being
just
called. Right? It was called loudly.
Yeah. We also just were talking about the KJ Henry play. We all know that was a sack. I mean, the penalty's going to negate it and whatnot. But one of the things that has crippled this team this year was we've literally gotten zero contribution from a draft class. And how are you supposed to take a few steps forward if that is absent? And I thought that was a positive, and hopefully something we can build on in the coming weeks and in the latter half of the season here.
Yep.
Go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say, and little in the way of contribution from last year's draft class. If we really want to be straight up about it, I mean, Jahan Dotson's had a real lousy year, up until just the last couple of weeks when he seems to have, kind of screwed his head back on straight. But the announcers on Sunday were talking about the fact that he decided to go back to basics. He went back and watched film of himself in college to try and figure out what he was doing wrong. And he realized that what he was doing wrong was just not catching the damn football. and so
it's that Penn State education working right there.
Yeah, it is, man. It is. But, I just had to, he's like, look, it's really simple. The guy throws you the football and you catch it. And I thought, if more NFL wide receivers were willing to look at their work we got a couple on the team right now. If De'Ami Brown was willing to go, I just have to catch the ball, Sam Howell would have about 3 more touchdowns this year. Because Brown's dropped at least 3 in the end zone that I have felt like were catchable through the first 8 or 9 games. So things I really liked this weekend, I kind of alluded or stated the first one, Jahan Dotson. And actually what I should say is getting our top 2 receivers more involved. And by extension, the obvious emphasis on Antonio Gibson this week. He doubled his normal touches in a game. He's been averaging like 5.5, 6 touches a game. This week he had 11. He ran the ball 6 times and he caught the ball 5 times. And he put up respectable numbers. He did well with every single touch. I don't remember a negative play.
He also did some damage on returns which we haven't seen.
You're right. You're right. I forgot that, John. So that's a 12th touch that he had, because normally those things go right out the end zone. But Antonio Gibson really stood out to me this week, and I hope he jumps off the tape at Eric Bieniemy too, and Bieniemy goes, I've got to get this guy the ball more. I've got to get him more involved. He along with McLaurin and Dotson, I feel like are the real electricity on the offense. The other guys are all pretty good at contributing, but I feel like those are the 3 guys that can make amazing things happen every time they touch the football. And they're the 3 guys we should be focusing on as an offense.
I had a list of likes in this game too. The top, I'll just mention the top 2. One I was already talking about. When that game is 14-10 the wrong way, we give up the ball and a bad turnover at the end of the half. We get the terrible call for KJ Henry. That's a game that could very easily have gotten away against a better team. It might have, but I give I give the locker room, and I'll even, as much as we toast Ron Rivera, his teams rarely give up. They don't show up once in a while, but they don't seem to give up. I thought the fight they showed and the leadership that was exhibited by a lot of the players, including Sam Howell, was kind of nice to see. That's 2 weeks in a row where we've seen strong effort throughout the 60 minutes of the game. And that to me was a strong takeaway. The other one is, and I mentioned last week going into this, that my biggest concern in this game was the matchup of Eric Bieniemy versus Bill Belichick with that Pats defense against our O. And against Wink Martindale the week before, I had said it had been a mismatch. They'd have stopped that fight because Martindale just took us to school. We held our own against Bill Belichick, at the very least held our own. That was not just any old team over there. That's Bill Belichick coordinating a defense specifically to go after a young quarterback. And EB and Sam, I thought there were so many missed opportunities. Sam could have had 4 or 5 touchdown passes in that game with just a little bit more luck, but they held their own. And that to me is very encouraging going forward. I would like to think that carries over to week 3, coming up another week here, where EB and Sam are clearly getting on the same page. We're halfway through the season. Things seem to be starting to spiral a little bit, not spiral, improve. Spiral would be the other way generally. That to me was a big takeaway from this game, that we went head to head with Belichick up there with all the swirling maelstrom up there that he's getting, right? A lot of pressure on Bill Belichick, the great Bill Belichick. Anyway, we got their best shot, and we went toe to toe with them. I was proud of that.
So I'm going to close this out on the positives, and then we'll see if there's any negatives we want to talk about briefly. I just want to piggyback on what Bob said. We averaged 5.6 yards a rush in that game. And more importantly, the stat that jumped out at me at all the stats I looked at, 23, we had 31 first downs in that game. 23 of them were rushing first downs. And I think that's something we haven't seen a lot of in previous games. So I really like that. I thought not that we ran it a gazillion times, but when we did run it, it was effective, and I don't think we were predictable at all. And then the last thing I'll say is, one thing I love about Bieniemy in particular is when we hear things focused on, like why is Sam getting sacked so much? Why is Dotson not catching the ball? And why is he having such a terrible year? Why isn't Antonio Gibson part of the offense? What we see is, what do you know? Sam's not getting sacked as much. Dotson's catching the ball when it's thrown to him. Antonio Gibson is getting the ball in his hands and making plays. So that's a big difference. And you guys, maybe we've forgotten how much we bitched about Scott Turner and how it was the same things over and over, and it never changed because Scott Turner was going to do what he was going to do. And I think it's really encouraging to see that we might have problems, but they're different than the problems we had 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
One more positive before you move on. Number 5 in your playbooks, number 1 in your hearts. Tress Way wins Special Teams Player of the Week because he's our MVP for the Burgundy and Gold. I'd be remiss if I didn't give him a little shout out.
I don't think he'll be the MVP this year, but if we were picking an MVP of the last decade, I think it would probably be Tress Way.
So we already talked about Diami not catching a big one. We talked about the terrible officiating. Anything else that we did not like in the Patriots game?
Yeah. To your point, John, and yes, I give Bieniemy credit. I give credit with a lot of it, but I saw in the first half, I saw I formation run behind your fullback's ass and get 2 yards. I saw off tackle rush to the right for Brian Robinson, and then in the second half it disappeared. You know what I mean? Like where there were multiple short yardage situations, one of which I want to say was 3rd and 2, and we tried to run Brian Robinson out of a shotgun and he got stuffed. You know, and it's like, well, where's that power formation that we were seeing before? Why get away from that when it was clearly working in the first half?
We traded away our defensive ends, and I got to tell you, I didn't feel like the defense was any worse this weekend, to be honest with you. I don't feel like this was a great test to figure out, where we are as a defense without Sweat and Young. New England offense is not historically bad like the current Jets offense is, but it's also not an offense that anybody in the NFL would be proud of at the moment either. So that's definitely a thing, but I was not thrilled with the lack of push up the middle. There was no, we kept the two defensive tackles, the high price, high round defensive tackles, traded the first round ends, and then we got, to my way of thinking, nothing extra out of them this weekend. They didn't come out and go, all right, I'm missing Sweat, I'm missing Young, and we've got to be a difference maker. I just didn't see anything.
We also didn't see, at least to my untrained eye, a whole lot of difference in the scheme and the defensive play calling.
No, it looked the same, didn't it?
It was kind of the same. It's still, I mean, it's
Pressure
not
with
always
four.
rushing four, obviously, and we occasionally bring somebody else, but it didn't look a whole lot different to me. So I continue to be disappointed in Jack Del Rio's inability to craft game plans to specific opponents like the best coaches do. We kind of do what we do with Jack Del Rio, and I think that's going to remain that way. We can hold a team like New England to 17 points because they have no weapons. And we were able to cover, and they helped us out with some. I mean, Mac missed some balls to open guys that could have changed the game. So
Yes.
we were able to basically shut down a kind of a punchless, toothless offense. That's what you're supposed to do, so you get credit for that. But I would like to have seen a little bit more aggression and sort of forcing the issue. And I think we're going to have to do that. I know we're not quite ready to transition to Seattle yet, but I don't think it's going to be a very different thing going against an offense like Seattle has with stud receivers and a quarterback who can get the ball there like quickly and on time.
Paul, you got any negatives to pile on?
No, I'd be repeating what Bob said, and I'm glad he brought it up because I thought that maybe I was probably just going to be too difficult or too hard on John Allen and Daron Payne, but same thing for me. You're ultimately the clear-cut leaders now on the defense. I want to see more from those guys, week in, week out. And I know Terry McLaurin led our team in receiving yards, was 73, I believe, this past week. But I don't know. I just find that too often he is not a focal point of our offense early in the game plan and early in ball games. It seemed to be an issue in past years, and to a certain extent, it seems to be an issue this year as well. We can't find a way to target him early, get him involved early, and it's almost as if he disappears from our offense for long stretches of time. And again, maybe I'm being too hard on the guy. I mean, I'm one of his biggest fans. I absolutely love everything about the kid. But when you're talking about elite star receivers in the league, a lot of these other teams get the ball to their elite star receivers over and over and over again. And I don't know, our top guy just, for whatever reason, doesn't always get involved enough. So
yeah,
maybe I'm just being too difficult.
I brought McLaurin up a couple of weeks ago and how his target numbers were so much lower than other elite receivers in the league that I felt like he should be in that, in that same company with, right? I really feel like he should be mentioned with Jefferson and AJ Brown and anybody else that you want to bring up. Since then, his targets have gone up, but he still hasn't had that massive breakout game that I think we're all looking for. And Paul, I think you're on it. We're not making him a focal point of the game plan early on and just feeding the other team a steady dose of scary Terry.
So I'm not disagreeing with that, but the other side of that coin is I think it was by halftime Sam had hit 8 different targets.
Yeah, 9 in total in the whole game. That's
seven of his first. He had 10 completions to 7 different players at one point.
There's something to be said about an offense that effectively spreads the ball to everyone all over the field and forces the defense to cover everybody. I'd like to think there's a balance in there somewhere, right? You still want to feature Terry, but if you can routinely and regularly find single coverage on guys who are open and your quarterback can get it to them, that's the other way to look at it.
So I just had two quick negatives to throw on the pile to burn, and then we can move on to the Seattle game. I didn't like that our running back put the ball on the ground again. I think that was the second fumble for Robinson this season. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but Sam Howell's been saying the phrase finishing games in a lot of his responses. Like, we've got to learn to finish plays. We've got to learn to finish drives. We've got to learn to finish the game. And this is the second game in a row where we played really well on offense, but we had a second half quarter. Last week, it was the third quarter where we were shut out by the Eagles at a critical time of the game. And then this week we didn't score in the fourth quarter. Now, luckily they didn't either by the, skin of our nose, but I just don't think you can go a quarter in the second half without scoring and expect to win many games. So anyway, that's just something I noticed.
Yeah, I was looking at the drive chart in fourth quarter, 3 possessions, 3 punts.
I don't know if that's by a design thing, we're trying to run out the clock kind of a thing, or it doesn't feel like that to me. It just feels like we maybe get a little more conservative, like what Derek was referring to earlier.
I feel like I got to take up for Robinson real quick, though. That fumble, that was a textbook play by the defender. I don't know that I've ever seen a better punch. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
That hit the ball perfectly square. It was perfectly timed. If you were coaching, that's the film you want to show every single defender of how to do it. And I think Robinson just got victimized by an absolutely
That's fair
play by the defender.
Yeah, he was in traffic, right? And he's starting to go down. The guy makes a great play, but I'm sure it's not lost on Robinson that in that situation he'd be better off with 2 hands on the ball. Like any running back will tell you that.
I think he had 2 hands on the ball.
Yeah, he had 2 kind of around it. The second hand wasn't on it. He was moving it to secure the ball with the second hand.
I'm going to be honest, Bob. Part of my agenda, I have an agenda with that, pointing that out, because we gut Antonio Gibson every time he puts it on the ground. And then we don't play him for 2 games, and then we see last week where he's a linchpin of the offense. So anyway, I just didn't like it. But you're right.
That's a great point. That is a great point.
And one follow-up on Terry. Terry McLaurin was a slightly better throw away from a walk-in 41-yard touchdown too.
And the first quarter, yep,
would have changed the whole dynamic of it. Like I said in chat, the ball was a little behind. Terry had to slow down. Brought the defender back into the play, but Terry got both hands on it. He's got, I think again he'll tell you he should have caught the ball, but I also think that 50-50. Yes, Terry should have caught it.
It was late.
But if McLaurin puts that, or if Sam puts that ball at the pylon or towards the back pylon and just lets Terry run under it, it's a walk-in touchdown. He's got 3 steps on the defender and nobody's catching him. So
think of what Sam's numbers would have looked like if that ball is a yard further out front. That's a touchdown. There was the one that if De'Ami Brown catches a ball that's literally right in his hands, that
it's
you
another
see every week,
touchdown.
a dozen guys make that catch every week in the end zone. That's another long touchdown. And there was one that I haven't heard anybody talk about that almost looked like a throwaway, but we were down in the red zone and Sam is getting rid of the ball late and Bates is all by himself in the end zone and Sam puts it all the way through the end zone. I think maybe he was trying to throw it away and he didn't see Bates, but it looked like one that if he had been able to see him, that's another gimme touchdown. Sam could have had another epic.
And we went 3 and out on the first drive because of a wide receiver dropping one in his hands. Like I could have caught that ball. So
that was Dotson, wasn't it?
It was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was Dotson. Very quietly, Byron Pringle had a really good game. He only had 3 catches, but everything that got within catch radius, he caught.
And they were in
a couple of times.
And they were in big spots too.
Yes.
I want to say 2 of them were on 3rd and long.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
all right. So I had one question, and I wanted your opinion. I wanted to know what you guys, because nobody was talking about it because we scored. But when Jahan caught the long touchdown pass, it looked to me like our wide receivers had screwed that up. And
there were 2 guys within
right next to each other.
Yeah.
And because we scored, the announcers never went back and talked about it. If we hadn't scored, I feel fairly certain somebody would have said something, but I have stared at that and stared at that, and I can't figure out what should have been going on.
Logan Paulson was talking about that play when he does his really good film breakdowns, and clearly that was not the design of the play. He was thinking that there is some latitude the receivers have on these routes on how close to break them out, how steep an angle to take. He was suggesting that one or both of them, they just happened, like maybe Jahan shallowed his route a little bit and Terry might have sharpened his in, and they just happened to end up closer than the design would call for. That, and that makes sense to me.
The question is, who was the ball intended for? That's the question.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
It doesn't matter.
It was for Dotson. I
It
don't
had
think
to have
it
been
was
for
for Terry. It
Dotson.
was for Dotson.
I'm going with that. I'll buy that for $1.
So I'm not where I know we're not going to get bogged down, but we've praised Sam a lot. What I want to praise him for is the continued evolution that he's still making mistakes. And again, Paulson was breaking down some of the things. He leaves the pocket sooner than he needs to sometimes, and has not seen some receivers that he probably should have seen, or you'd like to think he would. And I got no problem with that. He's still a young learning quarterback. What I'm really glad to see is that those mistakes seem to be lessening in frequency and in the amount of damage they cause to the offense. They're like sins of omission now, like not maybe seeing an open guy, as opposed to sins of commission and holding it too long and taking a strip sack or something. So the kid is learning, right? He is clearly
And how could we not mention that scramble? Shame on us for not mentioning scramble for the first down. Oh my God.
Yeah, you need 23 yards. Here, I'll give you 24.
That was one of those. He probably left the pocket early on that one, by the way. But anyway, that was something else.
If you go look at that again and watch Logan Thomas when they do the shot from up above, and Sam like gets through the stumbling part where it looks like he's going to go down and he breaks the tackles. Logan Thomas is just kind of standing out there. He has no idea that Sam is still moving behind him. And you could just see his body language like, oh shit, I should be blocking somebody. It's great.
All right. I will do that. All right. We got a game on Sunday, I think.
Yeah. And it's a 4:25 kick. I think this is like our only, this one and Thanksgiving, I believe, are our only, mid-afternoon kickoffs. The rest of them are 1:00'ers.
Rain in the forecast.
Well, it is Seattle.
There always is.
So are you guys able to not think about this game in the context of, here we go again, another opportunity game, we're coming off a win, playing for something, playing for, a playoff positioning, etc.
Ron talking everyone up about how it's all coming together now.
And he really likes his quarterback, by the way. He thinks he found one. There's no way that as a Washington fan for the last 20 years, you can't be thinking, oh, I've seen this movie, I know what's coming.
Well, and it's Seattle. I mean, how many times have the Seahawks broken our hearts when we really thought we had something going on? I don't mean to sound superstitious, but I absolutely believe in the concept of a boogie team. Right? The one team that just has your number.
Yeah, but
we talk about the New York Giants, and they're kind of that team. But if we get outside the division, I would pick Seattle every single time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You want to hear the scary thing about that? Right? You want to hear the scary thing about that? And I'm looking to confirm that. I heard that apparently in Seattle in the regular season, we're 7-1 against them.
Oh, I'd like to see that.
There's no way. It
doesn't feel like right, but
all right, look here. I'm looking at StatMuse right now. And this goes back to 76. Okay. Washington is 13-6 against Seattle in the regular season.
We own Jim Zorn.
In the regular season. I have the same feeling you do, but that's because they've kicked us out of the playoffs twice in recent history.
Yeah. I haven't gone back and looked at the history. The last win I can remember us getting up there was when Josh Dotson, one of those receivers, made some diving miracle
at the
catch at the
2 yard
end.
line. Yep. So I'll go back to since 2001. In November 4th, 2001, Washington win 27-14. The following year in 2002, win 14-13. The following year again, win 27-20.
All in Seattle?
No, I'm just going back into head to head. Well, then we'll go back since then at Seattle, that was 2002. And then in 2008 at Seattle, win 20-17. An 11 at Seattle, win 23-17. And in 2017 at Seattle, win 17-14. I think that's the Josh Doctson game.
Well, there you go. It's in the bag.
Yeah,
I totally am vibing with Mark. But I will say this team is a hell of a lot better on the road than they are at FedEx. I don't know why. I can't explain it, but you'll never convince me otherwise. Like, Rivera cannot get this team up to win big at home if his life depended on it, but get them on the road and who the hell knows?
I agree with that. We've talked about that too during the course of the year. We do seem to play more as a team on the road.
They've only had 2 quality wins. I mean, I was surprised. I didn't realize they were tied with San Fran and the NFC West at 5-3, but they've only had 2 what I would call quality wins. They beat the Lions in Detroit and they beat the Browns. And the other wins are the Panthers, the Cardinals, and the Giants, who anybody should beat.
We just take a minute to appreciate the irony of they beat Detroit in the
I know. I know.
In overtime. So I know that they're tougher at home. Their 3 home wins were a 37-27 against the Carolina Panthers, Bryce Young in his 3rd game. They beat the Cardinals with the legendary Josh Dobbs at quarterback, and they beat the Browns with PJ Walker at quarterback. They haven't exactly been owning the elite of the NFL. So,
and statistically, they're like, when you look at their offensive and defensive unit rankings, they hover around 19th, 20th, almost across the board. They're not statistically. You kind of look at their stats by unit and you're like, how do they get to 5-3? But they are 5-3.
And the only reason they're tied with San Francisco is because Frisco's on a 3-game unexplainable skid.
Mm-hmm. How you feeling about Seattle, Paul?
I don't know. It's a mixed bag for me. This is that sweet spot in the season, so to speak, for Ron Rivera, when he typically has his little run where we string together a few games and find ourselves or get ourselves back into the playoff picture. So it absolutely wouldn't surprise me if we came out and played strong. One of the things that worries me about this weekend is Seattle's defensive secondary. And for me, Sam Howell's development is far more important than the win or loss at the end of the day. I'm kind of thinking big picture, and I want to see that kid continue to progress. And we've seen the progression. We've seen 2 really strong games in a row, but I think he's really going to be put to the test this coming weekend against Seattle. I was looking at some stuff on PFF, and they have 3 of their defensive backs are ranked according to the PFF rankings in the top 30 amongst cornerbacks. Michael Jackson, Trey Brown, and Devin Witherspoon are all top 30 corners this season based on their play. They also have Tariq Woolen, who I believe was he not am I dreaming, but was he not up for Rookie of the Year last year? I may be mistaken. I don't know, but he's also quite strong and another really solid player in their defensive backfield. So I want to see Sam Howell really step up against a solid defensive secondary, and I want to see him perform and make plays against these guys and make up, so to speak, for that game against Buffalo when he played a really strong defense and he had a tough time. So I want to see that growth and maturation continue to happen.
Yeah, I think Seattle comes after us a little bit more than Philadelphia is the only team that surprised me by not sort of coming after us. Belichick tried it, but we were able to get the ball out quick enough. I went and looked at the Seahawks' disastrous loss to the Ravens earlier today, just because I wanted to get some takeaways and impressions. You know what you're going to see on defense on that team is a team that actually has linebackers, and what linebackers can do for a modern NFL defense. They are thick, they are big, they move, they hit. They've got Bobby Wagner in the middle, who's as good as anyone who's done it. This guy, Boye Mafe, 53, coming off the edge, is everywhere. They, even in a losing effort where clearly the Ravens had their number all day on both sides of the ball, Seattle never stopped coming. They never stopped coming, and they play hard. Between that and the secondary, Paul, that you're talking about. Say again?
Mafe has 6 sacks on the year.
Yeah, he's a badass.
But now, Mark, I didn't watch the game, but I was looking at the Ravens, just the stats. They pounded the ball on them. They ran it like 41 times.
They did.
They had 3, I think they had 3 rushing touchdowns, and then they also had a couple fumbles, so they could have had even maybe more rushing yards. But that makes me wonder. I know we're not the Ravens, but it makes you wonder, are we capable of like going rush heavy for a game? Because I think that would be our best chance against Seattle, is just pounding it.
Yeah, I'd like to think Sam doesn't have to drop back 38 times in this game, but that seems to be what we do.
But some of that dropping back 38 times is an extension of the run game. And we kind of talked about that last week a little bit. I mean, 6 of those dropbacks went to Antonio Gibson. And those were short passes out in space, getting back out there away from the line where he can do something. And I'm fine if that's what we're doing. I mean, it's a real throwback to the Bill Walsh days. It's a true return to the roots for the West Coast offense, right? But I still want to see us actually run the football more. And maybe that's just my traditional Washington NFC East roots. I don't know, but
they've got a couple of good running backs, man. Kenneth Walker is for real. And Zach Charbonnet, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he's pretty solid as a number 2. I have him on my fantasy pick team, so I know a little bit about him. And I don't know if you guys feel this way, but I feel like Geno Smith is exactly the kind of quarterback that comes out and has a career day against us. Like, he's not anything spectacular. He's just generally solid, but then when we play him, he lights us up. I'm trying to think of another example of that recently this season, but it just seems like the middling quarterbacks who we would normally feel confident, we can shut that guy down, because Geno Smith's not going to beat you with his feet at this point. He's gonna beat you through the air. But those seem to be the guys that always get our goat for some reason.
He makes plays. Geno, I think Geno's a little underrated. He and I don't know if it was this year, but it seems to me every season he has at least 1 or 2 games where he comes out and throws for 404 touchdowns and is just on. We haven't even talked about their wide receivers. This last week we didn't have to cover DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. We are going to, and they got Smith and Jigba, I think, who's sort of coming on too. They can play, and if we're going to try to man up, and I was talking to my son earlier today, and he said, what's going to happen the first time they put DK Metcalf or we put Forbes back on the field, they are going to send DK right over to wherever Forbes is and say, take him.
Yep.
So all of that said, that I don't think this is an unbeatable Seattle team. It's not like it used to be. This is not Russell Wilson. It's not the Legion of Boom anymore. It's a pretty good upper middle of the pack NFL team. We're sort of middle of the pack NFL team. We go in there and execute and don't make mistakes. We got a shot.
And they also did just shore up their interior D-line.
Williams.
They have a ton of injuries. Derek put up the injury list right before the pod started. They've got 7 guys that did not practice. 7. I mean, they're and I don't know how they handle their injury list. I know some coaches play games with the injury list, but that's a lot of your 53-man roster to be on a Wednesday and not practicing. So that we might get a little
I
lucky
feel
on
really
that.
bad for him.
You know,
Terrible.
I have no idea where this comes from, but I'm going to be curious to watch on Sunday. I don't know if this is a Geno Smith issue or a wide receiver issue or a combination thereof, but their wide receivers are not doing well in terms of catching the football when it's thrown at them. DK Metcalf has 28 receptions on 50 targets. That is just over 50%. And he's their leading receiver. Tyler Lockett's number 2, 38 receptions on 57 targets. Again, just a shade over 50%. Smith and Jigba, 29 for 43. It's not until you get to their tight end that you get a legit percentage. 14 of 17. That doesn't scare me much. But it just I don't know if that's Smith not being accurate or if that's the receivers not being able to reel it in.
Well, they're pounding the ball, man. They're 12th in scoring on the rush. They're not doing a lot of pass. They're not doing as much passing as they would have done with Russell Wilson under center.
Well, that's true.
It's a lot more of a ball control offense. So I really think, and Kenneth Walker, their leading rushers, if you add up Kenneth Walker and their kicker, that's more than half of their scoring this season. They don't
throwing the ball more than they are running it, though. 244 pass attempts to 188 carries.
Mm-hmm.
So I see what you're. I mean, I get what you're saying there. So Kenneth Walker has more yards on the ground than DJ Metcalf does in the air.
Yeah,
That's surprising.
Pete Carroll's a good coach, though, man. I think he's underrated, actually, because he's one of those guys that will fashion his team to what his guys can do.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's an alien concept to us as Washington fans, but he definitely can win different ways.
Except in the Super Bowl against the Patriots when they have Marshawn Lynch.
Does anybody have quick access to how penalized they are?
Hang on a second. Let me see if that's in
Did
the
not look at that.
statistic. I just have their page up on ESPN. I don't know if that's got it or not. Oh, wait. Here we go. Give me a second.
Their kicker's not good while we're waiting. Second week in a row. If it's a close game, he's only hit one from 50 yards and he's missed some shorter kicks. So we have an advantage on that side.
He is no Joey Sly.
He is not Joey Sly.
Wow. For 459 yards. They're averaging 57 yards a game in penalties, but that doesn't tell you how many. What, 56 in 9 games? So what is that? That's 6 or 7 penalties a game. Like that.
Sounds about average. Sounds like us.
Mm-hmm.
They're below 27. They're averaging 27 minutes in time of possession per game.
Well, that might be the key to this one, because I've been thinking the way they're going to try to play us is, and I think the way we'll defend them, because this is what Jack does, is we'll try to keep everything in front of us and make them go all the way down the field and try to score touchdowns. I think they're going to possess the ball on us, and we got to try to hold them to field goals and then count on the offense to do their part and match score for score and keep us in the game.
Geno's been sacked 18 times, so 2 per game.
While Sam's been sacked 44.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm saying is that
this
last week we didn't show a propensity to get to the quarterback any more often than, that's the one thing we did not get there, and we had been doing fairly well in the sack department. Now, granted, we had one taken off the board, but I'm a little worried about it now. I assume Jack would scheme some things up like he's done in the past when Sweat and Young weren't available. I'm with Mark. I didn't see anything new, and I'm worried that I didn't see anything new. And if we don't see anything new this week, I don't think we get to Smith this week either.
That's how the Ravens beat them up last week. They were in on Geno Smith all night long. They rarely sent just 4. They were sending 4 and 5, and they made Smith's life miserable. I don't see us playing that kind of defense. I think it's going to be a different kind of game.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think it falls out? It ends up working out, Mark?
I think we're going to show up. I think we're going to play. I think it's going to be, as again, I'm like a broken record. We play to the level of our competition generally, except for the occasional week when we don't show up. I don't think that happens. I think this team shows up again and plays hard and is in the game. I would like to predict a victory, but my brain doesn't work that way. I need to see it. I need to see us win games like this more often before I feel confident in them. I think we continue to make progress, but I think in the end, Seattle does Seattle things up there and the ball bounces their way. And they end up with like a 27-23 game on us, something like that.
Bob?
I gotta be true to what I did and pick them, and I picked Seattle and pick them. And I did that off the strength of my deep sense of dread because it's Seattle that you have debunked, Derek. And now maybe I'm regretting it a little bit, but I'm still with Mark. I think it's a pretty close game. Like this last week was a close game with New England. I just think that we come out on the wrong end of it this time because Pete Carroll is Pete Carroll. Although I kind of predicted that with Bill Belichick last week and it didn't come to pass. So maybe it won't come to pass this week either.
It would have been nice if we weren't getting them off of their humiliating road loss.
Yeah, and that's Derek brought that up earlier in the week that he would much prefer to be getting Seattle after a win than being spanked by Baltimore.
Yep.
Yeah,
I concur with that because NFL guys tend to get their pride pricked a little bit when they've been punched in the mouth like that publicly. So I expect Seattle to show up and play, and I expect it to be a really tight game. I don't expect it to be a hugely high scoring affair. I'm kind of with Mark. I'm going to say 24-21 Seattle.
So
Paul?
we have
John?
we are a second point attempt at the end of the Philadelphia game in Philadelphia from being 4-1 on the road this year. I don't know if you guys realize that or not. We had a debacle against the Giants. So I think we're a pretty good road team, like we talked about before. The main reason I'm picking Washington is because I really dug the Goodwill Hunting smackdown they laid on the Patriots. I like them.
Like them apples.
So I thought that was good juju. And here's the thing. I took my 10-year-old son to the Seattle playoff game when Gibbs came back in that miserable, god-awful Seattle weather. And those fans were the biggest pricks I've ever encountered in my life.
To Philadelphia?
To my 10-year-old son. I literally feared for my son's safety. So screw Seattle. We're going to win this game 24-23 on a closing second Joey Sly field goal.
Boom. I love it.
What do you think, Paul?
I'm gonna go with John on this one. I can't really explain why we're going to win, because I have a little bit of an uneasy feeling going into it, but I alluded to it a little bit earlier in one of my comments, but it just feels like it's part of Ron Rivera's DNA, and it's what Ron Rivera teams do at this point in the season. They're going to string us along, get our hopes up a bit, only to disappoint us come December. We talked about how we are going to have to make up for those two brutal losses to Chicago and New York. And another feature of a Rivera team in Washington is we always find a way to win it, to beat a team that we weren't expected to beat on our schedule. And I'm looking at our remaining schedule. We got Dallas twice, we got Miami, San Francisco. I don't see us beating those teams. Seattle's a pretty tough team, as Mark was talking about. If we're going to steal a game against the team to make up for some of those ugly losses earlier in the season, this would be the week to do it against a middle of the road team like the Seahawks. Again, I don't know how we're going to win, but we're going to do it. I like the fact that we were over 50% on third down conversions last week. And I think it's going to be important that we continue that trend this week. I'm going to say Washington wins 23-20. Don't ask me how.
Well, I didn't think we'd go to Denver and win, and we did. I didn't think we would. What was the other game that I thought?
Atlanta.
Atlanta and
Or
win.
New England for that matter.
I didn't think we would go to New England and win. I don't think we go to Seattle and win. So chances are we're gonna win. I just think it's too much across country and everything. I think it'll be a close game, but I do worry about what their. I'm not worried about their wide receivers beating us down all day long, but I do worry that at any time one of those two guys can go the distance. So I'll say Seattle 26, Washington 23. I don't know. Chances are we'll win now because I picked us to lose.
Well, but here's where we are, right? Stepping back and setting the stage. They do manage to pull this one off. They are at 500, 10 weeks in, with the Tommy DeVito-led New York Giants coming in with a chance to go 6-5 and be right in the mix. So this is a huge, huge opportunity game for this staff and this team to make 2023 relevant still for a couple more weeks.
Yeah,
It's
and
a
additionally, you have the tiebreaker against the Falcons, which I don't think is going to ultimately be a big deal, but
and you'd have it against the Seahawks.
Against the Seahawks would be a big deal. You would
Mhm.
wish you could have had it against the Bears because that looks like it might get interesting towards the down the stretch. But
And by the way, our next opponent is on pulling guys off the street to play quarterback.
if we lose to the Giants next week, not to get ahead of it, but in the state of the team that they're in right now, I mean, my God.
This is a big opportunity this weekend to go up and do something in Seattle. No one's really expecting us to do.
I'm not going to get ahead of myself, and I'm not predicting wins either, but I have not been impressed with the Cowboys since like the opening weekend. And we played Philadelphia a whole lot tighter twice than Dallas managed to do Sunday. They did not look great. Philadelphia was, I don't want to say that game was comfortable, but they certainly were not as uncomfortable against Dallas as they were against us twice. So I have a little bit of hope on Thanksgiving Day.
All right, that's it. We're going undefeated the rest of the season.
There you go.
We're going on a run, baby.
All right, I'm going to get us off camera before we get into that any further down that conversation. All right, fellas, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
All right,
Rock and
boys.
roll.